Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. I'm glad that you're joining us today. As you know, on our show, we talk about family wellness and mental health. And today's show will focus primarily on women in the military and just the unique struggles that they have when returning to civilian life, why it is challenging for some, while it may not be as difficult for others, and how those struggles differ from the struggles of their male counterparts returning from the military to civilian life. For many men and women who have served in the armed services, this is a transition that can be as difficult and challenging as military service itself sometimes. So we'll be talking today with Tommy Banks and Lynette Glover around their experiences in the military and post-military as they transition to civilian life. So Tommy and Lynette, welcome to the show. Thank you so much. I guess the first question that I have is, why is it important for us to talk about women in the military and the perspectives that they have around transitioning to civilian life once they're done with the military?
I believe that it's important to talk about the women in the military because, first of all, we always think of men in the military. For example, me as a retired female Marine, the first question I get if I say I'm in the military, they go, "Oh, were you in the Coast Guard or the Air Force?" The last thing that comes to their mind is a Marine, because when you think of Marines, they think combat, they think male oriented. And the males always, first of all, get that attention to, and I'm getting ready to use a military, attention to detail when it comes to what they need, how they need it, or other things of that nature. As a veteran myself personally, I did 22 years in the military, and transitioning was a little bit difficult for me because I had a child with special needs. And getting the things I needed as a woman, single, newly retired, there was not a lot of things out there available for me. It always seemed like it was male oriented. And just recently, I would say personally for myself, finding counseling aids and things oriented to women veterans have now just turned around, because they hardly think about us in the sense of what women need after the service. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. So I guess I have a couple of questions just as you bring that up. When you talked about coming back and having a child who had special needs that you needed to address, there's that question, because interestingly, in our conversation with our male veterans, children never came up. That's not something that even came into the conversation, right? And it's one of the first things that you mentioned as a female military veteran.
With a little over 28 years, honorably discharged, hoorah, hoorah. And transitioning from the military or reintegrating into the civilian world is a task. It truly is a task. As Lynette said earlier on, is that a lot of the conversations are about male with PTSD, male-dominated world. It's about men, getting the men back on track, so that they can help sustain the family because they are the head of the households and so on and so forth. Women, when you talk about us, we're looked at, oh, you got it? You're a woman, you're strong, you can handle it all. We're looked at as that we're the compassionate ones. So you didn't deploy with us, or the things that you did versus what the males did, it's not the same. So, but indeed it is, because we are all there together. We're all having some similar experiences, but because our gender has separated us into, again, the females, you guys got it, y'all can handle it, y'all more compassionate, you don't lead the way, don't charge the way like the men do. So those kind of things happen quite a bit, and I've seen it and I've experienced.
So, as you talk about the comparisons between men and women being more compassionate, and the expectation that you have it together, you don't need help, therefore you don't need as many services. And I'm assuming that what you're saying is that the services then are just more geared toward men because there's an assumption that women don't need as many?
Well, I think because we're not talked about as much. Not that the services, when you talk about men and PTSD, okay, when you hear PTSD or sleep apnea, you hear certain things, there's always a male connotation to it, okay? So not so much the women. I don't know if it's that we don't come forward and talk about those things. So therefore, that platform isn't necessarily built for that. Not that we can't come in and have those discussions, but it's just that the men are constantly talk about those things, if you will, if that makes sense.
So then I guess I would love to hear you talk about it. What was your personal experience coming back? What was it like for you? What were the difficulties that you experienced as a woman coming back home?
Well, I retired September 2015, 2015. And, I was so excited. I'm retiring, and I had a great career. So now I'm going out to this world, and I'm just going to take the bull by the horn, and I'm just going to go, Well, it didn't happen that way. Number one, when I applied for various jobs out here in the world, it's like, okay, well, not necessarily you're not what we're looking for, in terms of, my deal was in terms of, it was because I'm a woman, or because I, military, or because of lack of experience, because military teaches you all kinds of experience. It's how you package that and what you bring into the table. So I had my first job, it was great. It was great until, walk into the office, and everyone knows that you are, retired. They automatically assume, oh, you're retired. Oh, so these negative connotations come out of their mouth. Oh, you're a Marine. Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. How was it being in the Marines? Or are you here to, I can't say some of the things that were said, but I'm like, wow, yes, that was my job for 28 years. But however, I'm still human, and I'm a woman on top of all of that. And the pushback that was rendered was, I tell you, it was an experience that I never want to share with anyone, because when I bring the things to the table, when I bring in leadership, okay, maybe this is how we should do it, streamlining the process or whatever. It's like, okay, we don't want to hear that. I'm like, well, what was I brought on to do? So again, the career aspect or the job aspect, that was kind of hurtful. It's that the connectivities or the brotherhood that the military has with the males. Hey, set them up for a job when they get out. Hey, Bob, I got a job for you, so on and so forth. Well, Captain Tommy Banks didn't get that memo. When I retired, I didn't get that, so in doing my resumes and knocking on doors or making phone calls, whatever I did to get, to get a position, whatnot, it was a daunting task. I didn't have that sisterhood or that brotherhood, if you will, to help in those areas where I see a lot of my male counterparts, they get that call, or someone knows them from someone else, from a word of mouth. I know a lot of males that have received a position, a really pretty good position, from word of mouth, so that in itself.
So you're talking more around a discriminatory experience, really, post-military, because of your gender.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because last in talking with the male veterans, in describing the brotherhood, and you used the same word, In describing the brotherhood, he said, and that means women too. When I say brotherhood, I mean men and women. From men to women, the word means something different.
Okay. Yes.
What you're describing is very different. Your experience of it is just very different. You were wanting to say something as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback on what Tommy was saying about the transitioning, and a lot of it when we go through what we call TAPS is the Transitional Assistance Program. I observed what Tommy just mentioned about the male counterparts. They would be in in senior positions because I retired after 22 years. So the TAPS that I went to was I retired in 2011. So 2010, a year ahead of my retirement, I attended one of those seminars, and a lot of the male counterparts would speak with some of the VAAs that would say, hey, we got some jobs coming up and you would fit perfectly into this. And I never connected with that or was brought into that conversation, or I would overhear it and go, oh, so what else do you have? So I can totally concur and agree with what Tommy is saying on that sense of finding the jobs, leaving the military and having that connection or brotherhood or sisterhood, as she said, to move on to your next step or your next life in the civilian world. And that is something that I think would benefit women to be more inclusive in that. But a lot of times it's not that way.
I guess I also want to talk more just from a family standpoint. What was it like coming back? You were a mother, Lynette, when you came back, when you retired from the military. What was that experience like coming, just reintegrating where that was concerned?
Well, me and Tommy kind of came up together, and Oorah Tommy over there, that girl was a motivator. She we were daring to do everything, wanted to be drill instructors, wanted to go down, and they kept calling me for recruiting duty. They got me eventually. But being in the position we've been in as single mothers and handling both bags, because as a woman, period, I think our level of stress as women, we tolerate more just as the child bearers. We take on and we don't complain and we move forward with it, whether it's our mission and our job or our task at home with our family. For me, retiring in 2011, I had to make that hard decision because I really wanted to stay in, but having a child who was battling cancer at the time, I had to decide, okay, it's time to put that bag up on the military side and go home and take care of my children, considering he had basically been doing well at that point. So I decided to spend the rest of my life taking care of him. I actually had no intention on working, but that as a single parent in California, you can't do it. You're gonna have to work if you decide to stay in sunny Southern California. So for me getting the help for, and this speaks to a medical side of it too, for my son who was battling this disease, once you transition out, as an active duty person, we honestly never worry about medical. We never worry about, do I need to get glasses? Do I need to take my kids in? Because most of that stuff is automatic. You know what month you need to go to each year, from year to year. You know when you take your children in. You know when you take yourself in. Because if you don't know, somebody like Captain Banks over there is going to tell you, you need to go to medical. Your yearly due. You need to go and make sure you got all your financial stuff together, honey. Get it together. So you have that. But as a retiree transitioning out, your medical changes. Now you have those copays that are outrageous. Now you have to find a job, and you don't have the help that you had as an active duty person, being able to look for certain things you don't have. Me personally, the know-how to navigate for that medical aspect, where I always had a person who was my a nurse aid that helped me through that as an active duty person. Once you retire, your medical changes, your pay changes, your contacts change. So now you're on your own. And going through that, I learned that I had to ensure that I knew the things I needed to know to care for my child. And I had to be engaged. And I actually had to go to the VA sometimes and tell them, hey, this is what I found online. So I need you to help me research this so that I can get the proper care and get it paid for, because I'm a retiree and I have dependent children that still rate benefits. So you almost have to demand that as a retiree, because that connection to that commander or that sergeant major that's going to have your back going into the hospital to say, hey, take care of this Marine or take care of this soldier, is not there. And I had to learn that very quickly because of the fact the reoccurrence of my son's illness came back. So I stayed as close as I could, honestly, to my what they call exceptional family member coordinator. This is a person that's assigned to you while you're active duty, but I stayed in contact with mine. And for people listening out there, when you transition out, don't think there's no hope, because I went through.
You're listening to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show, re-airing every Tuesday at 4 o'clock. We hope this information is helpful, and we'd love to hear from you. So please send me a note at www.helpformyfamily.com. You can also check out our other shows and resources at www.legacychangersworldwide.com. Let's get back to the show.
Don't think there's no hope, because I went through that whole, I don't have nobody. And I had my mom with me and I had family around me, but internally the struggle I had, as Tommy mentioned about PTSD relating to military, well, the family struggle of a, I don't know if to call it the PTSD, but the high stress level there was real. And you have to find those connections to help you, especially if you have a child with special needs and you're no longer active duty.
Gotcha.
You have to fight that fight to keep your family as healthy and safe as possible. So that's where I was in my transition.
Gotcha. So Tommy, how was some of your transitions similar or different for your personal experience?
From my personal experience, I know Lynette, she struggled a lot and went through a lot. We are close, so and just hearing her talk about it, it's just like, wow, my transitioning, family transition was a little different. It was a little different. The old saying, the 6 P's, proper planning prevents piss poor performance, if you will. So I knew 5 years out. I said 5 years out, don't get the promotion, don't get this, or it's time for me to go. Whatever is in store for me, I need to start planning, because 30 years is all you can do, unless you hold a specific title, a particular title. So 30 years is all that you have. And I've heard so many horror stories where military members, they wake up today and tomorrow they have to get out, if you will, because certain things have transpired. And I never wanted to be in that place. So I did all this planning. I'm planning, my career, finances. I have my daughter, she's considerably older than my son, 13 years apart. So my kids have been with me. I was married. They've been with me. They knew about the military life and so on and so forth. So they were just luggage just came on along and whatnot. So, and it got to the point where it's time for me to retire in 2014. I'm like, wow, 2015, that's going to be it. That's it. I'm like, I got it. Rah, rah, rah. Let's go. So one thing I ensured was that when I was finished in sunny Southern California, I was stationed in MCRD, San Diego, is I know I didn't want to live in California. That was a no. So when opportunities opened up for me to come back on the East Coast, I quickly grabbed that opportunity. So, and it landed here in Atlanta, Georgia. So in 2014, I'm still ready because I got these plans. You heard me, right? The 6 P's. I got these plans. I'm ready to retire. I'm ready to transition out here to this civilian world. I got it. My kids are coming along. My whole family's together. Yes. Well, so I was happy. Everything was great, and it still is. But my daughter got a good job. She moved on, and it was just here. My son and I, we're here in Atlanta, Georgia. Not a lot of family members around. I'm looking at it, it's like, where's my support network? Because my support network had always been relatively close to me. I could reach out and touch them with a tight knit group. You know, if it wasn't Lynette, if it wasn't Tanya, if it wasn't my other girlfriends, and things of that nature. So my plan did not derail, but there was a slight pause, you know, trying to get my thoughts together, because I'm thinking that everybody's going to accept, you know, the retired Marine in all that I do. And I found that not necessarily to be the case. And when you get out of the military, when I transition out of the military, you know, I got a different feel. Oh, you're a Marine? Okay. Oh, you was military? Okay. But when I was in, it's like, oh, okay, you're the Marines. You know, I'm like, yeah, it's a different feel, different vibe, if you will. I haven't had the experience of medical issues or any of that nature dealing with my children and whatnot. But there is a difference in the level, if you will, level of care, level of treatment when you're transitioning or out, or you reintegrating into society. It was different for me because I'm used to having my hand on the pulse, being able to navigate, to facilitate. It's so unlike that here when I transition out. Now I have to call around and ask these questions that I felt like, I should know this already, but in retrospect, not necessarily, because I have not been a civilian. I was 18 years old when I joined the military. Now I'm at a different phase in my life where I have to ask these questions. And importantly, there's a group of us that used to get together and talk about these things because we just didn't know. And there wasn't a point of direction or someone that we can go to that had all the answers or had, you know, the manual. This is where you can go. Unlike the being on active duty, you can find the information, or someone is in charge of the information. You can go to. You can get that. But in the civilian world, it is not so. So in the group, I was like 6 or 7 of us, whether we're talking about medical issues, were we talking about job issues, entrepreneurship, the whole gamut. We had to come together and talk with one another. What did you find out? What did you get? You know, because there was a bleak moment. I'm like, what, how do people survive out here?
Sure. I'm thinking too, so Juan, you are retired military also. And so as you're listening, what are the differences that you're hearing just in your experience as a male versus their experiences as women?
For me, I can hear the differences as far as having that support, or having that extra background, so to speak, with giving that lead when it came to getting a job. I think one thing that I do need to bring out is when it comes to PTSD, the misconception is that only men have PTSD. And that's not true. I know for a fact that there are women in the military that deal with PTSD. And so that is something that really needs to be brought forward when it comes to the two genders, is that we both experience PTSD. It's just more prevalent as far as it being spoken about when it comes to men. Another thing that I noticed is that when it came to getting out of the military and seeking those jobs, the employers, at sometimes they seem to feel intimidated by the fact that, one, you've been in the military, and two, that you have leadership abilities that may supersede their own, and they feel threatened by your presence. So that's another thing that I'm curious as to see if my sisters have experienced that also, with that in going to applying for those jobs. Do they recognize, or can they see how the employers may feel intimidated by their own leadership abilities, because of their strong background from the military? So that's another thing that I've noticed, is that employers do definitely look at you in a different light when you come from the military.
Is that kind of what you were describing, Tommy?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I at the time I did not want to put a label on it. I wanted to learn. I wanted to absorb, to find out, okay, how do I mesh in with the with the office? But I quickly knew that wasn't. I quickly knew that wasn't going to happen, because of my upbringing, and because of my passion in what I do and what I've been taught. You know, as a military person, these are the things that need to be done. You know, so I knew that job was going to be short-lived, and it absolutely was, because I knew that I had a lot to offer, and I was what I felt being stifled,
Right.
you know, in such a way that I'm like, I'm a little bit smarter than the average bear. I catch on to what you're doing.
Exactly.
It's not going to work for me, because then it's going to be, oh, well, she's the angry Marine, or the angry Black woman, or this, that, and the other. What's her issue? I told you Marines were crazy, and those kind of things. So I quickly, you know, took myself out of that light, if you will, and went on and started doing something else. But even in a couple of interviews that I've had, especially most recently, I could tell by the look or the conversation that that I was involved in with the interviewees or interviewers, that, yeah, they're not going to select me, and here's why. So, of course, I did get that email, said, oh, he was overqualified, and so on and so forth. I'm like, really? You know, to pick a pen up and put it in another tray, I'm overqualified for that. But what I thought was, they're looking for someone, this is just my own personal deal on that, looking for someone that they could shape and mold to do the things that they want done. And also a person who's not going to overdo, because we all know, as I'll say, quote, air quotes, and then Marines, we come in and we ready to rock and roll.
Right.
You know, you have to tell us what to do, you know, just point, and we'll take action on that. If I'm anything less than what what my parents taught me, what I learned in the Marine Corps, then I'm definitely doing a disservice to myself if I did anything less than that. So
the civilian world wants submissive employees. They don't want employees that basically can think for themselves, or who are capable of doing the job well, far and above than what they're expected. So when it comes to military personnel, that's what we're taught. We're taught to be leaders. We're taught to step forward and to basically get the job done without question. We're going to get the job done, and we're going to do our best at getting it done. And that's where, in the civilian world, you have employers who are threatened by the simple fact that they worry about their own position, and you coming in and taking a position and running, you know, the company, or trying to run the show. And it's not that we don't set out for that. It's just that that's the way we have been trained, to do your best and basically forget the rest.
Mm.
You know, if you don't do your best, then why even try doing it anyway? So.
You're listening to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show, re-airing every Tuesday at 4 o'clock. We hope this information is helpful, and we'd love to hear from you. So please send me a note at www.helpformyfamily.com. You can also check out our other shows and resources at www.legacychangersworldwide.com. Let's get back to the show. To talk about the mental health pieces. Juan, you mentioned that while both men and women from the military experience varying degrees of PTSD, it's more prevalently or more readily spoken about when you're speaking about male veterans.
Yes.
So Tommy and Lynette, one thing that I haven't asked you is, in what capacity did you serve? What was it like for you in the military? Were you exposed to combat, and if so, how much? And
I served in, my basic job was food service. So I grew up food service. I actually wanted to be a chef coming out of high school. So I went to culinary art school. I joined the military when I was 21. So I went to college for 2 years, ran out of money as most college students do. And 8 of my friends, we all joined the military in various services. Over the years, through the ranks, I retired as a gunnery sergeant. I had various leadership positions. I ran various dining facilities and attended different billets or B billets, recruiting duty, which is a high stress duty, for 3 years. And that was towards the back end of my career. 1st Marine Division is one of the most prestigious, always looked at as they are the oldest, and what they call them, the blue diamond. So they're first for everything. I took fast track. I took 30 days leave, came back, and they said, Gunnery Sergeant Glover, you're going to Iraq. I said, oh. Now this is, mind you, 2004, 3 years after 9/11, and going into this area which wasn't that stable. So going into that, we were told already, you're going in a hostile situation, prepare yourself and be able-bodied. And that's the situation I went into. And coming off a fast pace of recruiting, going on to a fast pace of 30 days later, I'm going into Iraq and trying to stabilize a situation that was very unstable. We did the first elections. We did the Battle of Fallujah. I will say it was, and it did cause a lot of my comrades to have issues coming back. Mm-hmm. Some people I can say have been over more than once. They've been over 3 times. Their experience may be different depending on the level of responsibility or even the type of unit they're with. If you're with a supporting unit, you may be near the rear with the gear, but you still may have some contact. Sure. But you are in a position where you're more stable. Our situation was so unstable. I went to Iraq once. I only needed once to know that when I came back, my focus was going to change from military first, family second. God, it went to God, family, core, hoorah. I'm going to be there for you till the boots come off. Mm-hmm. But I had to really do a lot of soul searching in that aspect of it. And the issues, as Juan said about PTSD, there's another issue within that a lot of people don't talk about. It's called MST, mental sexual trauma. And for women in the military, some men as well, I've gone through some of the counseling sessions, and I've been the only woman in a lot of them, or one of 2 women in some of them. And the first thing they asked us about was MST. They didn't ask us about PTSD. Mm-hmm. So the definition that the VA has for MST is you've been sexually assaulted, period. It doesn't deal with as much of the verbal, even though the verbiage does say it deals with verbal. It doesn't deal with if it was a touching, but it wasn't a sexual touch. It doesn't deal with a lot of different things on that level of understanding. But that's the first thing they think about with women is the MST. But PTSD for a lot of the females that I was in Iraq with is a very real deal for them, some of whom I still stay in contact with. And we talk about it amongst ourselves. And I tried to join a PTSD group of men. I put them in tears with the stories I had. And they thought they were, when they went in there telling their combat stories, I'm like, okay, but I don't want to share. It took me 3 weeks to decide to share with that group. And when I finally did, they all broke down and cried. I'm like, look at y'all. I had to take a step back because I couldn't believe, one, I had finally opened up. Two, when I did open up, a few of the brothers in the group came to me and said, man, I will not complain anymore about my life because I cannot even fathom going through 1/3 of what you went through. And to hear that from my counterparts, I decided I didn't want to be in the group anymore because I didn't want to share, but I did find a connection with other females that I could talk about with certain things that have helped me along the way to where I am now, where I'm more in control of situations. One of the things Tommy mentioned earlier.
Do you want peace in your family relationships instead of conflict? Do you want a safe, loving marriage instead of one that is failing? Are you troubled about what's happening with your children and need help for them? At Legacy Changers Counseling Centers, the goal is to strengthen individuals and families with cutting-edge emotional and mental health interventions. The exceptionally trained counselors at Legacy provide the specialized guidance you need in a safe environment of belonging so that you can make the life changes you and your loved ones need. Get real help for your emotional and relationship needs. Call today at 404-334-7575. That's 404-334-7575. You can also find us on the web at legacychangerscounseling.com. Call now and transform your life today. 404-334-7575 or legacychangerscounseling.com.
Full circle for me has come, and I can honestly say now I've learned to deal with more of what I experienced than if I'd have talked to you 5 years ago. It'd have probably been a whole different person.
So Tommy, as you're hearing Lynette talk through that, what are you thinking?
I'm just listening to Lynette's story and I'm like, wow, number one, the bravery of opening up and talking about those issues. I believe in counseling. I certainly believe in that. In all my years in the military, I have gone to counseling, mental health. I always told my kids, if mama's not healthy, that means the whole family's not healthy. I got to get healthy, stay wealthy, and stay wise in all of that. So I just identified with her, in some of the things that she was discussing, and as well as the empathy, that I feel for the things that she had gone through as well. Not saying that mine was any less or any more than what she's been through, but this whole talk that we're having right now, I'm like, wow, who else is doing this talk, because it's needed. It is certainly is needed. With the PTSD, I tell you that I don't know if it was just before I retired or I was embarking upon retirement. I'm just trying to put a time frame on this. When I heard one of my, I want to be very specific, male Marines talk about PTSD, And there's a young lady who had disclosed that she had PTSD. And that just blew me away. And just listen to Lynette kind of brought that back to the forefront when we were talking earlier on, women with PTSD, how it's not talked about. And I'm like, wow, man, that was my reaction when I heard that a female or woman had PTSD. I'm like, wow, that's, what happened? That's why I want to know what happened to cause her to have PTSD. Advice, male, okay, they deploy a lot, they do a whole lot of training, a bunch of stuff. So that's to be expected. In one sense. I spent 28 years in this great corps. I came in as enlisted. Then I went to, I'm just going to keep it short, the warrant officer ranks to CW03. Then I was commissioned as a captain, LDO, limited duty officer captain. And like Lynette, I was a food service officer. I did a whole lot of stuff, but that was my main MOS. I also spent 6 years a drug and alcohol counselor, which I absolutely found that to be a rewarding experience to help others. So I did that. Traumatic impact. We can talk about this all day long. There was a lot of traumatic experiences that rested at my feet in the 28 years, whether it was discriminatory, whether it was race, whether it was gender, those kind of things, whether it was sexually related. So all of those at the end of the day have an impact, and they impacted me. Excuse me. And then some of those things led me to get counseling. Because I had to do a check. Hey, am I okay? Because I still have, I was married, divorced. I still have 2 children I have to take care of. Not only that, I have Marines that are under my charge. So I have to be healthy. So there was a lot of things that was on my plate that some was self-induced and some just came with the job. I did two tours in Iraq. One was 6 months, one was a year. And I tell you, I didn't go at the time that Lynn went. She went much earlier on than I did. The time that I went, more the cleanup had already transpired. We were there to still provide the security, still to provide a service to the people over there. Then the second time I went, I had a job there for, I think it was for like a month. It was on the Lioness team. That was just I had to be around be aware of my surroundings at all times, and understanding that it was 6 young ladies and myself. We could be in a camp with nothing but male Marines. Okay, male Marines.
You talked about going to a therapy group where there were all men. You were the only woman, and that was your first experience with that. You talked a little bit about the things that were going on in your head that your family didn't necessarily know was rolling around there for you, that you were struggling with. If you could talk to families who are listening and say, here's what you need to understand about your women coming back, and how their experiences have impacted them, and how to understand the things that they do or say, or the things that they may be going through, even if they are not talking to you about it. What would you say to family members who have women in the military, sisters, daughters, wives, coming back? What would you say to them? How should they understand their family members?
I would say to them to just be supportive, because that's vital in that transition. I have my god sister, I call her my sister. Nobody know we not blood related, but in speaking with her, just listen to them. Let them decide what or how much information they want to share with you, because it's a process. And that process, it may take months, it may take years, but you can't force that information out of the veteran or active duty member, even, because they have gone through something that, one, they may not want to share with you. I was listening to Tommy talking about the Lioness program, and we spoke of that with General Latosky, because of the fact we were searching women that I was afraid they had bombs under their hajis or whatever. But we had to do something for the women. Stuff that my sister tells me now that I didn't even realize I said to her. And I said it just because she was listening. And when I said it, I said, "Oh, I didn't tell you that." For example, one moment we were in Iraq and it was incoming, and we had a phone. Working in food service, you actually have access to stuff because we work with civilian contractors. So I was able to call home from Iraq. Well, I was sharing a story and my sister go, "You didn't tell me that." I said, "Oh yeah, I told you." Well, we had incoming and bombs were hitting just across the street from me, and I'm under the table talking to her on the phone, acting like everything's okay. And I recently shared a story with her about, yeah, that was incoming and this was going on. She said, "Wait a minute, I was talking to you. And when you were saying it," I said, no. But I explained to her, or she explained to me. She said, "See, I listen to you and I don't say anything. I just let you talk." So just listening, the veteran's going to share information, and they're going to say stuff. Be supportive. Don't force them to talk, because all you're going to do is shut them off. They're going to stop talking to you. As I said, in the group, I was the only female, and I'm like, I ain't sharing nothing with these people. I didn't even feel a connection to them, so why would I share? But for family members, there is a connection. There is that love in that family, that even though that veteran may be going through something now, eventually, if they get the proper help, they'll share. And just be supportive in that nature and don't try to force it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how does family members, help when we come back? I was like, I don't know. So I called a couple of my friends. I was like, I don't know. I haven't put a face to that yet. But what I will say is that from military to military person, we all have a connection. We all feel a sense of they are going to understand what I'm talking about. Whether they lived that experience or not, but they understand the dynamics of the different things that I will share. One, then two, I believe that it's a two-way relationship. For me, I'm a talker, I've always been a talker, and counseling has always been, a part of who I am, to open to share, so that I can get clarity and I can move forward in this chain. So for me, if I have to, I know not to talk to my mom about certain things because I know what answer I'm going to get. Okay. I know that I could talk to Lynn about certain things because she's going to connect with me and be able to understand. With my other friends who retired folk, even though they're military, they may get it, but I talk to them about certain things because I know that they'll get it. Again, it's about being able and comfortable enough to have that dialogue. And family members, they're, for most part, not all, can be very well clueless on how to help. We have to guide them. We have to feel a safe place to say, okay, if I talk to my husband about this, or if I talk to my mom about this, or my dad, or whatever that family member is, okay, what will their response be? When we know that they don't necessarily can understand what it is, but we have to give them the opportunity okay,
Mhm.
to help us.
What would you
know.
say if I were your family member,
Mhm.
not knowing anything, and my
Right.
question to you was, what do you need?
Mhm. And my immediate response to you would be, I'm not sure what
Yeah.
I need.
Mhm.
But when I just listen to me, just listening, whether I'm complaining, whether I'm just asking a question, or whether I'm standing in this space, I just need for you to listen and to just be there in that space with me.
Mhm.
Okay, because I don't know for me, I don't know sometimes what it is that I need.
Yeah.
Is this old guy used to say, try to fake it till I make it, but that doesn't always pay the bill, pay the
Mhm.
bill. So,
Yeah.
and I try to be a communicator. I'll never forget quickly that this young man, that I was dating here and there, whatever, and he said, "Hey, when I'm driving, I can't see, or I think about the time when I'm in Iraq, so on and so forth." I was like, "Okay, all right, no big deal, gotcha." Then one night, he was driving again. He said, "Did you hear what I said?" I said, "About what?" I just totally forgot what he had said. He said, "Well, I have trouble driving at night, and you didn't say anything, or we got in the car, this, that, and the other." And I was like, "Oh, snap. I heard you then, but I forgot. Now you had to remind me
Mhm.
about that." And I would never forget that, ever
Mhm.
forget that again when someone mentioned that, because I'm going on with life,
Yeah.
not thinking about, he disclosed something that was traumatic for him, and it brought back certain things. So,
Mhm.
um, so I always kept that on the forefront. When it's not, "Hey, I drive. Hey, I got it," kind of deal. And that's because we've been trained to do things that way. But our family members have not been trained to do that, because they have not been with us. Some of the
Right.
family members have not been with us. I hadn't seen my mom in several years. So if I went home, she's gonna like, "Oh, I remember you when, growing up in a household, not thinking about the things that you experienced while being on active duty."
Mhm.
So she doesn't have a clue, idea. So I would have to talk to her and say, "Hey, Mom, if you, I don't know." But that is a question that's been toying with me ever since you sent that questionnaire out. And
Mhm.
I've been out surveying and asking my friends, what would you say,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
your family members in this case. So
Yeah. And so you said some in part. You said listen,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And Lynette, I think you also alluded to a piece of it, or maybe it was you, Tommy, who said sometimes I just need to talk to someone who understands,
Mm-hmm.
that I don't have to explain everything to. They
Right.
understand some of it because they've been in it. And so a response to family members might also include allow me space to find additional supportive others who
Mm-hmm.
might not be part of the family. And it's not a rejection of my family. It's just easier potentially to talk with someone who has had the experiences around that. And family members, I'm sure, will vary in terms of how they take that in and respond to that. But it seems like what you're saying is that there's going to be a balance. There's going to be some things that I can talk to family about, and other things that I just need to talk to others who've been in the military
Right.
about, and it just would be easier.
Right. What has been great for me is that when my daughter was living home, um, and I did do this with my son, we would always have a debrief at the end of the day. "What did you do today? How was school? How was work, Mom? Oh, hey, Mom, I heard you talk about this." I may not go in great details, but I said, "Oh, yeah, the day was a bad day because this, that, and the other." And to me, that was an outlet, but not a unleashed all the things that was going on with my daughter, but to feel that my daughter heard me, and she wanted to know how my day was. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing with my son. Today he's like, "How was work? How was this? How was school?" So on and so forth. So that with my kids, they got to know who I am, and there was things that I needed to discuss. They weren't the ones that I would, again, tell all the intimate details about it, but they were in my household, and they are part of my family, and they. For me, they needed to know, oh, mom had a bad day today. Well, what kind of things happened? Believe it or not, kids are really smart. And I know some of the feedback that I received from them, well, mom, you should have thought about this, that, and the other. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. I was like, they were like, okay, duh. I was like, okay, cool beans. I'll remember that for the next time. So there was a great sense of a solace for me, if you will.
Awesome. Juan, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm just listening to it all. And when Tommy was saying she didn't know what to say, I said, you basically, to me, you were saying to listen. They just need someone to listen, and you have to give them time. You can't force it. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And you have to explain to your family members, friends, that you're going to need their patience and their understanding, just that listening ear, and to pay attention to detail when you're listening. As Tommy said, with gentleman said that he had trouble driving. She heard him, but she didn't listen. But when it was reiterated to her, then she caught it and she listened and realized, light went off. At night, I may suggest that I need to drive, or I will drive. So it's just a matter of listening. But when you listen, you actually really have to pay attention to details when you're listening.
Yeah.
Because it's just the little things that someone may say that it's a lot to them. But if we're not really paying attention to the details, it's something that we can miss.
You're listening to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show, re-airing every Tuesday at 4 o'clock. We hope this information is helpful, and we'd love to hear from you. So please send me a note at www.helpformyfamily.com. You can also check out our other shows and resources at www.legacychangersworldwide.com. Let's get back to the show. How does it look different? With the men that we interviewed, they said that men learn to shut down emotion, that men learn to just be in survival mode all the time. And when they come home, they tend to stay that way if there's not some type of intervention happening that allows them to be able to move through that. How does it look in women? Typically, when we hear the news, we hear about military men, just anger, violence, just things like that. And those are the extremes. Those are the few on the extremes. It's not necessarily the typical, but does it look different for women coming home? How do women express that trauma differently than men might express that trauma?
I honestly, when I first started going to counseling, the anger, I couldn't see the anger. I couldn't understand the anger that some of the individual men had in those groups. But as time went on, I kind of saw why, if you felt there was no connection to no one, that you could possibly go into that dark hole, for lack of a better term, and be angry with the world because they don't understand you. But it's something I feel like as women veterans, we have dealt with the stereotypical discrimination as women in the military from day one. Once we finish boot camp, in boot camp, we're all equal. But once we finish boot camp, you learn the real world of the military is they still treating us different. So with that being said, we already learned to cope as women in the military from day one after boot camp. Once we leave those yellow footprints and our sisterhood of boot camp, and Marine boot camp for women, it's all women. I know other branches of service is co-ed, so they deal all the time together. But it's still, to me, a separate but equal for women to learn to cope when they're in an environment where it's predominantly male.
Mhm.
So they've learned to deal with anger and hold back the words they might want to say to senior enlisted because they're junior enlisted, or a senior officer because they're a junior officer. We've learned to deal with that always from day one.
Mhm.
So that anger for us is more, I guess, under control. We control the anger. We don't let the anger control us. That's
Okay.
what I want to say.
Okay. And I would venture to say too, as mothers, you can't really, you don't have the outlet to shut things down because you have children. I wonder if it's the case that with, aside from gender differences where men are socialized to not deal with emotions in the same way that women are socialized to deal with emotions, I wonder if there's a not a protective factor, but maybe men are able to do that and for longer periods of time, because if they have children, they also potentially have wives who are doing what they do with children. And so men can separate themselves to a degree and take longer to deal with things like anger and shut those things down and not necessarily deal with it. Whereas as women who are mothers, if you do that, it's coming out in your children. You're going to see that immediately in terms of your ability to actually manage as a mother. So I wonder if that also has or plays a part in how you deal with life post-military, especially if you're a mother and a single mother, as you guys have said. So is MST more frequently spoken about for women in the military than PTSD?
In my experience, yes. But what they do is because they automatically assume that a female has experienced some sort of MST. And they automatically assume that you, if it isn't physically sexual, you got PTSD. But it may be a form, and this is just me over time learning this, it may be a form of MST that's non-sexual. And until the VA starts recognizing that definition more, instead of just saying sexual assault is the only MST, then there's still work to be done on that. Because PTSD to me deals with the real trauma of the conflict or the issue that you were in.
Sure.
And that for women, as Tommy even mentioned earlier, like a woman with PTSD, oh, she got to have MST. That's the first thing they want to say. So they try to figure out for a woman going through counseling, oh, were you sexually assaulted when you were a child? Were anyone ever touch you when you were a kid? So they go all the way back to your childhood and try and bring it back up to, okay, in the military, how were you treated? And that's the first go-to for them. Once they figure out if it's not that, then they say, okay, you might have PTSD. And I think that's a misconception that needs to be put to bed and just say, hey, women have PTSD too, as well as they possibly have been in a situation where they were verbally sexually assaulted, and it's still MST.
Yes, yes.
I would like to say this real quick. I had not heard of MST. You know, I've heard of all the proverbial sexual, sexual assault, sexual battery, that kind of stuff. Was a few years ago when Lynn was in counseling, or she was talking about that. I said, MST, what is that? Again, where have I been all these years, right? And here PTSD with women, not MST. That just goes to show you the great distance and the disconnect, on some of these issues. So
Yes.
I had not heard of MST. Again, I'm like, mental sexual trauma, what is that? So I had to go out do a little bit of research on my own. So
Yes.
like, wow, okay, there's something else, to be considered, with everything else.
Do you want peace in your family relationships instead of conflict? Do you want a safe, loving marriage instead of one that is failing? Are you troubled about what's happening with your children and need help for them? At Legacy Changers Counseling Centers, the goal is to strengthen individuals and families with cutting-edge emotional and mental health interventions. The exceptionally trained counselors at Legacy provide the specialized guidance you need in a safe environment of belonging so that you can make the life changes you and your loved ones need. Get real help for your emotional and relationship needs. Call today at 404-334-7575. That's 404-334-7575. You can also find us on the web at legacychangerscounseling.com. Call now and transform your life today. 404-334-7575 or legacychangerscounseling.com.
And the final question is, if there are one or two things that you want to make sure that people leave with as they listen to the show, if they forget everything that you said, if there are one or two things that you want folks to take away, what would those one or two things be? Especially family who want to know, how do I help my military women?
Communication, good communication and listening skills, making a safe place to unpackage things. And that's what I will leave with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And knowing that seeking counseling is an awesome thing. It truly is an awesome thing. So besides that,
for the veteran, if they're listening, to seek out as much information as possible. For military personnel transitioning now, there's so much more information out there, and the internet is like a vast amount of information. When they're transitioning, don't be the stigma, PTSD. Don't be afraid to admit you have PTSD before you get out, because the challenge is once you get out and things do happen, you've already transitioned yourself saying, oh, I don't have any issues. Don't put that falsehood out there. We all have something. We all have something. And as Tommy said, get counseling. Seek that counseling before you transition out and become that veteran who's going to need the assistance, because you do have PTSD going forward. And get as much help as you can, and don't be afraid of that help, because it's there for a reason. These things have been put in place to help us understand PTSD, MST, all the acronyms out there that deal with mental health, and the socializing into the civilian sector for us. So don't be afraid to seek that help. And for the families, as I think we reiterated it a lot, is just listen and be an advocate. That's the one thing I would say. As a family member, be an advocate for that veteran who may not always know where to go, or who may get frustrated and angry. To you being that advocate for them and going out and seeking the information may just save them from another hardship that they would have experienced without you advocating for them.
Well, I certainly appreciate your spending time with us today and sharing your stories and sharing your information, encouraging other women transitioning into civilian life, speaking to families to let them know and give them some perspectives around the things that their military women have potentially experienced and or are experiencing just as they transition. So much appreciated, much appreciated.
Hello everyone, this is Dr. Sutherland. Thanks for listening today, and I hope you'll join us again at this same time next week. If this information has been helpful, like us and share on Facebook at Legacy Changers Worldwide. You can also find other shows and resources to strengthen your mental health and family wellness at www.legacychangersworldwide.com and by subscribing to Dr. Sonja Sutherland on YouTube. I'm in your corner and always hoping the best for you. I'll see you next week.